In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is your host, Drew Hill, joined as always by Chris Herrington. Chris, we've had no NBA games for a week now. We record this on Wednesday. We're, I guess, looking forward to the second half of the season. May not be quite as fun for the Memphis Grizzlies the second half of the season, but we will have some things of note, I think, as we go into the final stretch. I'm guilty of saying second half when it's never actually the second half. I'm one of those.
It's the final third, kind of something like that.
The final third, I know, but I do fall into that trap every single time. We did have a couple of newsy things that happened this week. Adam Silver did talk. Well, I want to start here at NBA All-Star Weekend. I think the big news was essentially that he acknowledged that NBA expansion is something that the league is considering. There was some thought that maybe a vote on expansion would happen in March. He wasn't committed to that. He did acknowledge Seattle and Las Vegas as potential markets, although he said he did not want to tease them, which I thought was interesting. And then the big headline news here in Memphis that everybody wanted to hear was that relocation is not on the table. What did you make of Adam Silver's comments?
Well, I don't want to rain on the parade, but I feel like this is a thing where people have taken the ball and run with it a little too far.
Yeah.
I think his actual quote was something like, relocation is not on the table right now. And what I took that to mean is that relocation is not on the table in conjunction with the expansion question. Meaning that whatever two cities are next in line for the league, and everyone believes that Seattle and Las Vegas, maybe it's not, but everyone believes that those cities are going to get expansion teams, almost certainly they're not going to get relocated NBA franchises. So, any thought that people had about, whether it's Memphis or other markets too, there are other markets too, that, that those cities would be leveraged as a potential destination if your other issues don't get sorted out. He sounds like he's taken that off the table, that those cities or whatever cities it ends up being are going to get expansion teams. They're not going to get relocated franchises. That does not mean the relocation question is completely off the table forever for other markets where there are ownership or arena issues. That's not just Memphis. That's also Portland, which has an arena issue outstanding. That's Minnesota, which has an arena issue outstanding. That's New Orleans, where there are all kinds of questions. I don't think he's closing the door on that as a possibility for any place long term. I think he's only saying that this immediate question right now around expansion is going to be an expansion issue. It's not going to be a relocation issue, which I think is good news for the Grizzlies, for Memphis, and for those other cities I mentioned. But I don't think it just completely wipes out all future questions, around arena and ownership issues for these cities.
Yes, I agree with everything that you just said. I think that maybe it's a slightly a relief because that does, I guess, eliminate two markets that clearly want NBA teams at this point that would project as very profitable markets for the NBA. Right. And this is sort of what I had heard coming out of the trip to Europe, which was that the expansion was the focus first and foremost at the moment. And I mean, everything that I've heard from talking to folks around the league is that, like, it sounds like it's not a surefire thing that it's going to get approved, but it sounds like it's more likely now than it ever has been that expansion is going to get approved. And so that certainly will push any questions about relocation back by several years. And, the Grizzlies lease ends in 2029. So, and they're still trying to work out something with the city through negotiations to get that, figured out. And so that, I guess alleviates some pressure there. And so that I think is a good thing. But you're right. It doesn't necessarily take all questions about that completely off the table forever, but maybe it does bump it back a little bit.
Yeah. I think again, I think I don't think the league is going to deal with a relocation situation in conjunction with an expansion situation. I think they're
Right.
going to deal with expansion. And I think, the second part of that coin for the Memphis, again, there are other cities that have issues that they're dealing with right now, not just Memphis. But for Memphis, I think, there needs to be some kind of agreement, hopefully this summer or before the beginning of next season, that will bring some form of clarity to the near term, medium term. I sort of doubt there's like long term. We don't know what's going to come out of this, but the same thing when the arena was built, where it's like some 25-year, like pretty hard lease. I kind of don't think that's going to happen, but at least some near term, middle term clarity about the future, I think would be very welcome this summer.
Right. Yeah, I think that's correct. And what's interesting is the para part of this is just we can't know. He doesn't speak publicly. You can't know how para feels because that is
Right.
not made. I wonder. I thought about this the other day. If a lease agreement is made, if we'll get some sort of comment from Robert Para. Is that maybe
you mean beyond a statement in his name put out, right? Cause
beyond that, or maybe are we sure we'll get that?
Yeah, we'll get that.
Maybe. I mean, if there's anything that would warrant him talking about it, maybe it's agreeing to a new lease to stay in the city, right?
Right.
But we just can't know. It's the one thing we cannot know. The other news, I guess if you want to call it news from the weekend, or was the All-Star game itself and what happened on the court. Jalen
Which
Wells,
I gather was good. I didn't watch it. I had other plans, so I missed out.
I watched the first game of the All-Star thing. It was World versus Stripes, I think, and it was pretty competitive. And then I had other things to do. And, when you give me a break at this time of year, I'm going to try to take it. So I definitely tried to take it. But I also gather that it was more competitive than it had been in the past. I did watch the Rising Stars games. There's just so little to that. There's so little to take away from that. Cam Spencer hit a three. Jalen Wells hit a couple threes. And that was it. But Jalen Wells is undefeated in the All-Star Rising Stars, I should say, not All-Star competition. So he'll end his Rising Stars career a perfect 2-0. So that, I guess that's good for him. But there really wasn't all that much to come out of it. I think that pretty much wraps up everything that came out of All-Star weekend at least for the Memphis Grizzlies. We had the Silver press conference and we had the Rising Star stuff, and that was it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, Cedric Howard not playing maybe was bigger news than Jalen Wells and Cam Spencer playing.
Yeah, I guess so. He will be reevaluated when the team comes back this week. They will return to play on Friday at home against the Utah Jazz. The league, the other bit of news, the league is taking a stance against tanking. I guess they fined the Utah Jazz $500,000 and fined the Pacers $100,000 for essentially either maneuvering their roster to tank or in what Adam Silver deemed was like a little bit of violation of the integrity of the game. In the case of the Jazz, just benching their best players to end the season, or to end the game, I should say. And now Jaren will be out for the rest of the season.
Right.
I don't know if this is going to be enough to deter teams from staying with the program here and trying to, be as bad as possible to conclude the season.
Well, I think maybe just being a little bit more deliberate and careful about how you go about it. The Mavericks announced this morning as we record, they're not bringing back Kyrie Irving, which I think surprised no one. I don't know whether Zach Edey's going to play again this season. If he does, if he does, that'll be the Grizzlies deciding they want him out there a little bit. There's going to be no pressure from the NBA to put him out there given the injury situation there. I don't think. The Ja Morant thing is the interesting question. because Morant had a real injury. We all saw it. But it was not like a season-ending injury, and I don't think there's any way to make it that realistically that I can see. And so, how do the Grizzlies deal with him the rest of the season? How does he want to be dealt with in terms of playing? How does to what degree does the NBA want to police that, given the NBA's awareness of all the issues around Morant and the Grizzlies? Like, it would not be the case of sitting down a player you're planning to bring into your team next season, you know? And so, I think that's a real interesting question for the Grizzlies. But that's kind of the only one. The rest of it's kind of easy for the Grizzlies to navigate all this, you know?
You don't think they want some level of runway for Zach Edey to conclude the season?
I think they should if he is fully clear. That would be my desire. I don't know what your question is what do I think they want? I don't know that. Also don't know what the real situation with him is going to be health-wise, right? Like, is there any risk at all in bringing him back this season? Is it better for him? Is it better for him physically to have a little runway? Is it better for him physically to have the longer layoff going into next season? I don't know the answer to that. To me, if the answer is that there's no harm in bringing him back, I would like to see him come back personally.
Do you think that the way that they handled Brandon Clark coming off the Achilles might be an indicator of how they would maybe want to handle the Zach Edey thing? They wanted Brandon Clark to have a runway during some level of a intentionally bad season, you know?
I do. I mean, it's slightly different players, different situations. There's more of a long-term situation with Edey they're trying to manage, whereas to Clark, it's like, you know, it's sort of a question of, can you get him back? Is he ever going to get back? I mean, he's the best behind him kind of thing. And so I think there's more of a long-term investment in Zach Edey. And so there's that. But yeah, I think if there's no reason physically not to, I think it would probably be good for him and the team to get him out there a little bit.
Okay, before we get to draft stuff, we're going to maybe talk about what we would find interesting post All-Star break for this team. Do you want to go first? We can trade back and forth on a few topics here.
Yeah, I'm working on a mailbag column. I'm trying to write today to get up maybe for tomorrow as they return. Trying to keep this one to a one instead of the double-decker mailbag I've been doing. I'm trying to keep this to one. But I had one question in there that I was glad to get because it's something I'd been thinking about already, and it's actually about basketball on the floor now, not about, you know, the trade deadline in the future and all that, which is what most of the questions are about. And it's about Cedric Howard. And it's about, like, you know, isn't this the opportunity to give him the ball and say, like, go try to do stuff? And I think the answer is yes. That has not been happening, I think, notably, or it hasn't really been noted. Cedric Howard, the last time he scored 20 points in a game was January 11th. That's more than a month ago now. Obviously, he has had this injury issue. They've been off for the last week. If you look at his usage rate, like, per month, now he's only played 4 games in the month of February. But in those 4 games, his usage rate is by far the lowest of the season. Like, you know, they took Ja off the floor and they made the trades they made, and you thought, well, okay, Cedric Howard's about to get the ball, and he didn't. He didn't get the ball. And I think this is an interesting thing. I don't know how much he's going to play going forward, given the injury situation and given what's going on with the team. But to the degree he does, I'd like to see him get the ball. Like, get your reps in as more of a high usage guy, more of an on-ball creator. Take your lumps and try to develop that part of your game. To me, that's the number one thing I would like to see the rest of the way. And I find it somewhat curious we haven't already started to see it.
Yes, that's interesting to me as well. And he is such a cerebral player. He's so different, I think, than your average rookie. I just compare him a little bit. This is not a shot at Gigi, but like to Gigi, his rookie year. Cedric Howard's obviously a lot older because he had more years in college than when Gigi came into the league. But Cedric is just such an all-around player in general, and I think he thinks the game in such a mature way that to ask him to do that almost might be uncomfortable for him, right? Because he's so used to playing within the system and trying to help.
That's where you grow. That's where you grow, by getting uncomfortable. So I think they should force him into that situation more.
I wrote a story about this when I wrote about the foot stress reaction stuff. And one of the things Cedric Howard said to me was essentially the hardest part about, you know, being an NBA player now is how quickly the games have come at him and the pace at which he has to, like, be willing to pick up and learn new things versus trying to perfect certain areas of his game. And so I think to ask him, hey, go take a bunch of shots would be more challenging for him than it would be for some other players on the team. So I think that's an interesting note. I'm interested in Gigi Jackson to conclude the season because I do think that there was a point where it felt like all the promise that Gigi had showed early in his career was in jeopardy because of maybe a little bit of immaturity, and Gigi pulled out of that a little bit and I think started to handle things a little bit better coming into this season under Isolo. And Isolo had mentioned it himself, like Gigi's such an extrovert and so loud and friendly and fun that it can almost be a little bit of a distraction. It can get in the way of his focus at times. And so he was wanting to see a little bit more of that from Gigi as the season went along. And I think maybe that could be an ongoing thing with Gigi, who's still a very young player. But he has played really well recently, and he's really gotten to the rim a lot more this season. I think he's playing a lot more physical than he has played in the past, which is a big plus. The defense has been better. It hasn't been perfect, but it's been better, which is definitely notable. And so there was a stage, I think, earlier in the season where I wondered if the Grizzlies were going to look at Gigi Jackson and say, look, this is a young player other teams might be enticed by. If we're going to do the rebuild thing, it's not that it wouldn't fit our timeline, but maybe he has actual value and we can get a different player that we think may fit what we want to do a little bit better. But now the talent is popping again. And I think you have to sort of acknowledge that. And he definitely fits the age for a rebuild timeline. So I think he will be one of the more interesting players to watch as the season comes to a close.
I think the interesting thing about Gigi to me is that, and some people may disagree with this, but I think it's almost the opposite of Coward, in which Coward, you want to see him get uncomfortable and be more aggressive about looking for shots and looking for touches and taking on a bigger role. I think with Gigi, part of the challenge this last third of the season may be to not do that. It may be to maintain the discipline that's gotten him back on track. We know Gigi can hunt shots and score in a tanking, losing situation. Like, we've seen that, right? What got him back on track was having a more disciplined game. It was narrowing his offensive repertoire to physical downhill drives, like attacking the rim with power and taking good, mostly catch and shoot open threes, right? Good threes, strong drives. That's gotten his offensive efficiency back up. And he's increased his focus on defense. And, I don't remember. I looked this up this morning. I don't remember exactly. But over the last 15 games, among players who've played more than two of them, there were only 3 or 4 Grizzlies players who actually have a positive net rating. Like, the Grizzlies have been losing. But players where the Grizzlies have actually won their minutes. And Gigi Jackson's one of them. Because, to your point, the defense has not fallen apart with him on the floor. And I think that productivity, that fitting into a team game, focusing on his strengths, improving the defense, to me, can he maintain that discipline and keep building on what has gotten him back on track going forward and not slip into the, hey, we're trying to lose, the games don't matter as much, let me go hunt my shots. Because we know he can do that, but I don't think that's the thing that's going to keep him on the right path.
Yeah. I think he and Coward, if you were to guess who's going to be scoring the most points, who's going to lead the Grizzlies in points per game to conclude the season, I mean, you might go Ty Jerome if he's going to continue to play. If he's going to continue to play 20 minutes a game, but
I think he needs to be a point a minute, right?
Like, is Ty Jerome going to be too good? But if you were to guess who's going to score more, who's going to average more points for the Grizzlies per game to conclude the season, is it going to be Gigi Jackson or Cedric Coward? I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah, Gigi's a hungrier scorer, but I think with Gigi the key is maintaining discipline, and I think with Coward it's getting a little hungrier. It's an interesting thing. All this stuff is specific to specific players and their situations.
Okay, let's continue this rest of the season conversation, but first let's take a break for a message from our sponsor.
Want to make a big impact without getting lost in a big system? Join Youth Villages to be a force for families while becoming part of one. Help make positive changes on a national scale, one community at a time. It takes a family to transform lives. Start with yours. Apply now at youthvillages.org/careers.
Okay, I'm going to jump back in with another one here and go 2 in a row. It's going to be fascinating to see how this team reacts to the direction of the franchise in general. Like, you know, they're going to say they're not going to – the franchise will never outwardly admit to tanking. No NBA franchise would do that. But this team is definitely going to prioritize some of these younger players and take a little emphasis on winning as many games as possible. I think we know that much. But that also can create a tricky situation for coaches, especially first-time coaches and coaches that haven't been in the league for very long or around the players for very long. And so I'm interested to see if Islo can just manage the locker room if the team is going to lose a lot of games to conclude the season. I think that's something that's difficult to do. I'm not going to be one of those people that's going to sit there and criticize every coaching decision when we all know the future direction of the team. I don't think that's fair. But I think that, you know, in this type of situation, it can be difficult to manage people. And I think that's going to be a real test for Tomas Islo. And so to what degree we're really going to know how well he does that, I'm not sure. But I think that matters. That's something to watch the rest of the season.
I mean, having Morant still on the team after they've tried to trade him and maybe back on the floor, I think increases that volatility and that complexity. I think absent that, not to say it's a non-issue because I think it is an issue, but we've already heard Coward basically voice what's going on. Sort of repeat the company line and basically sort of acknowledge what's happening, you know, whether it's a rebuild, whether it's a whatever, where, you know, so, and he's probably the most important player, him and Edie. I don't think there's, you know, given that Edie is not playing or whatever, I don't think there's an issue there. I think Ty Jerome, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope are the kind of vets who, they're solid dudes who like understand what's happening and they've been around the block a few times. They understand what's happening.
And Kyle Anderson.
And Kyle Anderson, definitely. Yeah. They're also not the kind of players who are like, you know, have a lot personally on the line right now in terms of Kyle Anderson will be a free agent, but like they're not really playing for contracts. They're not playing for their stature as much. Jerome a little bit, but I think he's just happy to be out there playing now, given the injury thing. So I think a lot of times when teams do this, the roster becomes such that either there are a lot of guys who aren't going to be here long term, or the ones who are younger and developing, and it becomes not as much of an issue. But I certainly think it could, and I think the fact that Morant is still around and it's uncertain how they're going to deal with him as an active part of the team, I think adds an extra layer to that for sure.
Okay, what else you got? Rest of season topics.
So there's I'll do one just quick one in passing, and then get to the main thing. Taylor Hendricks is he part of this or not, or is he a roster spot to clear this summer? I think that's something they have to try to figure out. And it'll be the next couple months are important for him because in terms of establishing himself, not just with the Grizzlies, but just as an NBA player. But more interesting to me is this glut of small guards. They have too many guys who profile as backup point guards. And that includes Ty Jerome, by the way. I think he's somewhat in a separate category from the rest of the guys. But when you have Scottie Pippen, Walter Clayton, Cam Spencer, and Javon Small, I mean, all four of those guys are interesting. All four of those guys might be really good backup point guards in the NBA. I think there are some situations where I can see Pippen as a starting point guard in a decent situation, depending on who else is on the roster. But it's hard to imagine. It's hard for me to imagine all four of those players in particular, Pippen, Spencer, Clayton, Small, on this roster next season. So I think there's some sorting that has to happen, and I'll be interested to watch those guys. I think, can Pippen reestablish himself, you know, as a potentially important piece going forward, the way it seemed like he was coming out of the playoffs last year. And with Clayton and Spencer, they're just so similar. They're like 6'3", 6'4" combo guards who are deep shooters, and you're not quite sure if they're point guards or not. I have a hard time seeing Clayton and Spencer both on the roster next season. So I think how those players all play and how sort of they get sorted going into the summer, I think is some productive work yet to happen.
I was going to bring up Clayton as well, because he's interesting to me. In part because when you look at the Grizzlies' draft history and a lot of the types of players that they've brought in the first round, a lot of them have been high efficiency, high production college basketball players. And Clayton was clearly a high production college basketball player his last season at Florida. So I guess I believe Zach Kleiman when he said, that was a player that they were interested in the draft that they acquired. But he doesn't necessarily really fit the same profile that a lot of the other Grizzlies first round draft picks since Zach Kleiman was in charge, fit. So I'll be interested to see if he's an NBA player. Right? Like I know there's a lot of folks that really like him and the Grizzlies have thought highly of him, but to this point, his rookie season, he hasn't really shown all that much. You got to give the guy more time, obviously. But I'm curious what level of player he really can be. And as an older guard that came in, you kind of expect results a little bit more quickly than somebody who might be 18 or 19,
I think it's somewhat important to the Grizzlies to get him on the floor, get him being productive, to sort of, if not, I don't know if rehab's the right word. He's only halfway into his rookie season, but to shore up his value around the league. Because I think they're so in on Cam Spencer that I think if they feel like they have to move things around this summer, they're more likely to move Walter Clayton than to move Spencer. And so I could see Spencer as the kind of guy who you get him some playing time the rest of the season. He sort of confirms to people that, whatever people around the league's ideas of him was before the draft, maybe he does well enough that that's not changed. They're still interested in him. Maybe he's a guy you move for future second round picks. Maybe he's a guy you pair with your current second round pick to move up from 32 to 28 or 27 in the draft to target a guy. I think it's important for the Grizzlies to turn him into positive value for the team. And maybe that's as a player long-term for the Grizzlies, but maybe it's also just as a sort of a smaller trade chip. So I think it's important for him to get minutes, for him to play well and to show people, that he could be a real player. I just don't think, like I said before, I just don't think, going into next season, you're going to see Pippen, Spencer Clayton, and Javon Small all four on the roster.
Do you have anything else? That's it.
Not
for
really.
Me.
That's the main stuff.
The only other things I could even think of is the guys that survived the trade deadline that you maybe wondered because they have value. Santi, Ty Jerome, I wonder how they're going to get used, a little bit, because to some degree you want to get your best talent out on the floor and see it, but you also have, future assets to protect. So,
Right.
We could go down that path, but I don't think we need to do that. Are you ready for our weekly segment, Chris? Can you pull up Tankathon?
Oh, yeah. I don't have my other laptop here, but let me pull it up on my phone. It's always handy on my phone. It is
Here we
never
go.
far away. Hang on. I'm not there yet. I'm pulling it up. I am there. Are we ready?
Yep. Okay. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Run it.
All right. I'm hitting the sim. All right.
Okay.
I'm not going to immediately discard mine this week like I did last week.
Mine is whatever. I've got Kings at number 1, Pacers at number 2, Wizards at number 3, Hawks at number 4, Nets at number 5, Jazz at number 6, Mavericks at number 7, and Grizzlies at number 8. Sticking at 8.
Mine is one I think we could all agree. Maybe there's some greedy people out there who wouldn't do this, but I think most people would lock this in right now. And that is Eastern Conference Indiana Pacers at number 1, Eastern Conference Brooklyn Nets at number 2, Eastern Conference Atlanta Hawks at number 3, and your Memphis Grizzlies at number 4.
I would lock that in so fast. I would lock that in so fast. And both you and I are on the record saying that we believe this is closer to a top 4 draft than a top 3 draft.
There are people starting to talk 5 lately, but I believe that Caleb Wilson is a similar level prospect as the guys who have been the consensus top 3. So I'm comfortable at least calling it a top 4. Yeah.
Yep, I agree with you. Who would be the 5th?
Keegan Fleming's people are getting excited about. And
True
Wagler,
freshman,
Mikael Brown,
6'4".
your guy is it
Michael
Michael?
Brown.
You got Michael
Look,
Brown's coming on strong now after a rough start. I
look,
mean,
I like him. I have questions though about if he's a Grizzlies type of guy.
yeah,
Like Michael Brown has looked like a top 3 draft pick the last 3 games. He's played incredible for Louisville.
yep,
They just lost to SMU last night. But he's the type of player that has crazy output performances, but also has a lot of mistakes in those performances. And I guess
right.
when you're 20 years old and you're a freshman, that's to some degree to be expected. But I don't know. I think I like Acuff more as a point guard than I like Michael Brown right now.
I think, and again,
honest.
this is all subject to change. Like I said last week, I was 10% of the way. I'm at like 15% now. So my opinions are subject to change until like post combine. Basically, I'll lock in my board once we get the measurements. I'm pretty smitten by Keaton Wagler, and part of it is just a stylistic thing. Like I enjoy watching him play. I enjoy the pace and the craft and the feel and the sort of the idiosyncratic nature. There's a little bit of Kyle Anderson herky jerky like slow mo thing with him, but I think. It has been proven that you don't have to be a super athlete to be an all-star level perimeter player in the NBA. You have to have other superlative qualities. That could be size, it could be strength, it could be vision, feel, processing ability, it could be shooting. In most cases, it's some combination of those things. Like Luka Doncic has all 4. Like he's not an explosive athlete, he's got all 4 of those things. Keaton Wagler does not have all 4 of those things. He does not have the strength, and that's a question. But he's 6'6", and he's got the vision processing ability, and he can pull up and like jack 34-footers with ease. And like, I don't know, man. When you can do all 3 of those things, you may be able to overcome athleticism problems.
Have you watched any college basketball recently? I did watch Houston versus Iowa State because Joshua Jefferson on Iowa State is a player who really interests me, and obviously Kingston Flemings. But did you watch any games this week?
I watched Kansas versus Iowa State, and Iowa State swallowed up our guy Darren Peterson in that game.
Our guy? He's not my guy.
He's not your guy? Okay, I was just saying. He got swallowed up in that game pretty bad. I watched that game. I watched Michigan play somebody. UCLA, I guess, somebody who didn't have like pros, but Michigan has 3 guys who are sort of in the range of the Grizzlies' 3 picks, and Yaxel Lindenberg. I'm going to apologize for any mispronunciations. I'm still working on that.
That was good. That was good.
A day? Is it a day?
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about. I know Yaxel because
Yaxel
because
Lindenberg
he played
and
against
Amar
Memphis.
Morez Johnson. I kind of like all those guys. With Lindenberg, he's going to be almost 24 draft night. That's a question. I do think that the Grizzlies, this is not something that's going to come into play with the first pick, but they got 3 right now, right? They got a lottery pick, they got a mid-first round pick, they got an early second, depending on where things go. But right now, they need another big at least. They don't have a backup center on the roster going into next season like at all. And so I'm kind of one of the things I'll be looking at over the next few months is trying to get a handle on some of these backup centers who might be there, maybe early second round, you get your backup center. I thought the Mari guy's pretty interesting. He's 7'3". He's got real size. He's not a total stiff. He can run the floor a little bit. He's a good passer. If you want to mimic the Zach Edey size component as part of the way you play when Zach Edey's on the bench, like that's a guy who's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting to me is that when look at the top players, let's move back up to the top of the draft class here. When I look at some of these players, obviously there are talented guards, and the Grizzlies will be in need of a talented guard.
Yeah.
There's also players that really fit some of the profile for previous Grizzlies draft picks, like high efficiency, high production college basketball players that are bigs. And that's, to me, what's fascinating. Like, if the Grizzlies got the number 1 overall picks, this is a total guess. I do not know. But based on their draft history, my prediction is that the Grizzlies would have Cam Boozer as their number 1 player. That's just a guess, like total guess. But if
the Grizzlies were an expansion team with this front office, I think you would be right. And you're probably still right, because do you really alter a number 1 overall draft pick because of Zach Edey as good as you think he is? But it's a real question about the Boozer Edey thing.
I know, but you could play that with a lot of different players. Like one player, I'm almost certain that the Grizzlies front office literally I'm just going off of draft profile versus previous draft profiles of Grizzlies draft picks under Zach Lyman. Hannes Steinbach, Washington, 6'11", power forward, a rebounding monster. But does that fit with Zach Edey? I don't know. That's what's so interesting. Like some of the players who I'm like, oh yeah, that guy feels like a Grizzlies type of guy. I have questions about how they fit on the roster. So to me, that's where I'm having like I'm doing the mad scientist thing. I think we've had very different approaches, I guess, to watching some college basketball. Where I think of it as like I don't even care who I like quite as much. I want to know who they are going to like, the Grizzlies.
I mean, typically the better players determine your style, and then the lesser players have to fit around the better players, right?
Yeah,
so I
that's
think
right.
the deeper you go in the draft, the more the fit issue arises, right? And that's what I bring up. Like, and to me, it's really a Zach Edey question because Cedric Howard like fits with anything, you know.
Yeah.
Edey is a very specific kind of player, and so at what point in this draft are you even considering fit with Zach Edey, right? Are you even considering that with the number 1 overall pick? I think you probably can't because
No.
you're hoping that player's better than Zach Edey. But if you're picking 9, if things go poorly, you're picking 9. You're not assuming that guy's gonna be better than Zach Edey, and so maybe that is more of a consideration.
Yeah, and if you're picking 9, you get to a range where it's a little bit more. I mean, it's funny the way like if I'm looking at Tankathon's mock draft right now, they've got a lot of guards in that like 4 to 10 range, and then beyond that, there's a couple, but it's just a ton of forwards and bigs all the way up to pick number 20 on their mock draft.
Yeah, they've got 4 lead guards. If you call Wagler a lead guard, it's a little unclear. He could be an off-ball, more of a 2, depending. But they have basically 4 lead guards between 5 and 9. Well, no, 5 between 5 and 10 with Philon. So you're talking about Flemings, Brown, Wagler, Acuff, and Philon. 5 out of 6 picks there, outside the top 4.
Total hypothetical situation. This is another thing that's crossed my mind over the last few days as I've prepped draft stuff. We've seen the Grizzlies trade up in the draft quite a bit, and that's been pretty frequent. And this draft may be particularly hard to trade up in because of the talent level. But if I told you the Grizzlies could package right now the number 8 and the number 17 pick to move up a couple spots and get the guy that they really badly want, do you think that that's a smart decision? Or in a rebuild, do you kind of need the bodies? Do you want 2 cracks at this, 2 bites at the apple,
No, I think you stack up those future picks in part to be able to use them for this purpose in the move up. And if the top 6 or 7 of this draft coalesces the way it seems like it's going to, I mean, I think 8 and 17 move you up to 7? Yeah, maybe. But if you're talking about moving up to 4, 5, 6 in that area, I don't know if 8 and 17 gets there.
I don't think so.
8, 17 and another future first, maybe that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think so either. But I do find it interesting. Like I think the Grizzlies would be good to get multiple players out of a very talented draft, given that they're setting out on a rebuild. But we have seen them trade first round picks and trade up like they did last year.
I think that is absolutely going to be part of the strategy. That doesn't mean they'll end up doing that, depending on what the deal is, but I think they will actively look to do that.
Look, maybe
that may not be with the first pick. It may be with the second pick. It may be
exactly.
that you stay put with your first pick and you try to move from 16 to 9 or something like that. I don't know, or maybe later on, like I said before, maybe you're trying to move from 33 up to 25 because you see a guy you really like. I think they will be active and aggressive and trying to target guys and go get them. Yeah.
Okay. We have months of draft talk ahead of us, so we should probably save some of it for down the line. Anything else, Chris, before we get out of here? There's more to life than basketball. What have you done this week?
What have I done this week? My son and I went to see, and if you're listening to this in Memphis, you probably have missed your chance because it will be gone by Friday. It'll be a 1 week and out. We went to see this movie called Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, which was a total mystery to me. I didn't understand anything that was going on before I saw it. And apparently it's a big screen version of what originally was a Canadian web series like 15, 20 years ago, like a comedy series, like a mockumentary thing. It's about 2 guys who formed a band they called Nirvana the band, Nirvana with 2 N's. And their life goal is to get a show booked at this local club in Toronto. and it's not clear if they've ever even written a song, but they just want to have the band and they want to get a show. And it's like a comedy mockumentary thing. And so they made this movie, and it is unlike anything I've ever seen. Like, there were multiple times where I'm like, how did they do that? Did that really happen? It's wild. It's sort of in the Borat, Jackass, like, is this real? Is this not real kind of world? But it's different from those things. Anyway, highly recommend people checking that out whenever it becomes available to you, wherever you are.
Did that just come out, or I guess because it's
it just came out. In fact, it opened last week in Memphis, and it's going to be gone after 1 week. 1 week and out. We saw it here, and we saw it in Minneapolis earlier this week. My son and I, we both gave it 4 stars on Letterboxd. So,
okay,
we were aligned in enjoying Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie.
Well, I know you're on record that you don't like grunge music. So at first I thought that it was some sort of documentary.
Nirvana, but I don't really. I think they're separate from that. But anyway, go ahead.
So I thought that was some sort of documentary, and I was very surprised you were going to watch this. No. Very much not a documentary. My kid went to daycare for the first time this week, so that was fun. And I've been watching a lot of the Olympic hockey. Look, I know you're not a hockey guy. You're not much of a Winter Olympics guy, but you spend significant time in Minnesota now. Okay, you're in a hockey town. Like half the team is from Minnesota.
Our neighborhood park down the street, people set up temporary like hockey rinks during the winter, like pop-up hockey rinks.
Yeah. I know. You need to at least pay somewhat of attention. And the Minnesota Wild, Matt Boldy, is one of USA's star players. Like half the team, it feels like, is from Minnesota. Are you a fan of, like, where does Miracle fall in terms of cheesy sports movies that your list of those?
I never saw it. The Kurt Russell thing.
You never saw it.
I just never saw it. But while on the movie topic, Robert Duvall died. Rest in peace, Robert Duvall, 95 years old, one of the all-time greats. Go watch a Robert Duvall movie this weekend, everybody.
All right, that's going to do it for us. We will be back next week talking some Grizzlies basketball. We'll have some games to talk about next week. But until then, for Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.